Grayson's Grades, they're brought to you by Tuckahoe Turf Farm, the official sod provider of Lincoln Financial Field. Get stadium quality for your lawn. Go to ttfarms.com for more info. Call 877-TURF-FARM. And I know yesterday Scott filled in on the Countdown to Kickoff show. I think he was the only guy who picked the Eagles to win the game yesterday. Scotty Grayson's with us now. What's going on, pal?
Doing good. How about you, Mike?
Everything's good. You did pick the Eagles to win yesterday, and, you were one of the few. It seemed like everybody thought this was the trap game. This was going to be the game that they kind of get, caught, that the injuries on the defensive side of the ball caught up to them, and maybe they did, but somehow they persevered. So let's get into the grades here because some very interesting grades. No Fs this week in another Eagles victory here. So let's start at the top of the list in a win and go to some of the guys who got passing grades. Some A's handed out this week, and let's start with, how about Doug Peterson? You gave him an A this week.
Yeah, honestly, I just felt like he really did a good job managing the game. I mean, he kicked field goals when he needed to kick field goals. In fact, one of the biggest things I think I appreciated in what Doug did was he had, and he talked about it today, he had some third and longs, like 3rd and 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 yards to go, and he ran the ball, which to me tells me two things. He had a lot of faith in Elliott and wanted to get him a little bit closer in case they didn't get the first down. And he had said that he had studied things and tendencies in himself, and he recognized that was probably something they were going to expect was him to pass in those situations. And I think, look, I finally saw some evolution in Doug Peterson and some growth. And I think that's kind of what we've really been looking for. And he got the running game going, and they relied on it. Now, I thought they went away from it too much in the middle of the game, but when it got down to when you need to win the game, they did it with the run. They did it with all three backs, which I was impressed with as well. The offensive line seemed to stabilize more. 4th and 1 on their own 49. I'm thinking, yeah, Doug's going to go for this. But late first half, it showed me he learned a little something from the week before in the fact that he punted that, wanted to flip the field, try to pin them in, and, it was the right choice. I just think Doug has shown a lot of growth in that game. They lose that game last year. There's no doubt about it in my mind. Probably because of Doug Peterson. They didn't yesterday. They won it, and I think it's credit to what he did.
Also, on the B category here, how about the offensive line? I mean, I guess part of the reason why Doug feels compelled that he can run the ball is because his offensive line is turning into a well-oiled machine.
Well, I think everybody kind of thought this is what you were going to see in these first few games. It was neat, and that's partly because of Isaac Seumalo's struggles, Chance Warmax's struggles last week. I think you do have to give credit to Steve Wisniewski and his veteran. You can't underestimate a veteran offensive lineman because they've been through so much in their careers that they can draw on, that they've learned from. And, that's something that I think, to his credit, he really applied. And I think the rest of the guys around him, for whatever reason, seemed to gel pretty well with Wisniewski. But it was, the issues in the past few games have been mostly due to what was happening at that position at left guard, because it was creating so many other issues with the other guys trying to figure out how they have to cover up the mistakes that were taking place there. And it just was a domino effect. And I think yesterday that offensive line really gelled well. They were opening up some really big holes, particularly early in the game, as well as then later in the game when they needed to have some of those runs. Those guys really did a good job. I've ripped them in the past. They've gotten, as a unit, a couple of Fs from me earlier in this season, and I just think that they definitely deserve to be in that game. And it was reassuring to see, and something that I think Eagle fans should be excited about if they can just get some stability going there and build on that here in the next few weeks.
Scott Grayson's with us, Grayson's Grades, and Mike talking about some of the offensive positions. I'll switch to talk about some of the defensive guys, Scott, particularly Derek Barnett, because with Fletcher Cox out, people were wondering who was going to step up and try to do the job on defense, who was going to be that guy that stepped up on defense. I even got a tweet on social media just before you came on about Barnett in pass coverage, too, and how impressed they were with that. And we do remember that he was the guy that could do the flip back when he was in college in the video that came out, so he is an athletic guy. But what grade did you give Derek Barnett?
I gave Derek Barnett a B, and it's interesting you mentioned him in pass coverage because he instantly tweeted out, what is he doing covering that far downfield? It was something like 20 yards downfield, and he was covering, I believe it was a wide receiver or a slot receiver or something like that. And that is not the position you want to put a defensive end in most times. To his credit, he did a decent job. I don't think you want to ask him to do that too much. But, he was there, and I was impressed with the fact that he was there. I don't want to see him have to be there. I'd rather he be up along the line doing other things, including rushing the quarterback like he did so well in college. But, yeah, he covered pretty well downfield with that one. And, look, you can't underestimate how important it was, the fumble he recovered, his first career fumble. He reached down with one hand and just picked it up, which was incredible because, those things can lay around on the ground, and eventually the offense will find a way to get it back. Him picking up that ball, tucking it, and laying down on it was an impressive play and a big play, and you can't underestimate how huge that was. I think he got something like 24 snaps, so he's definitely making an impact, and he looks to be getting more and more comfortable in these games as they're going on. So I know the Eagles are looking for big things out of him. That's why they drafted him in the first round. We got to see if he can continue to build on some of the successes he's finding now as we go through the rest of the season. We're a quarter of the way through. Let's see how much Barnett can grow in the last 3 quarters of it.
And, of course, that fumble forced by Chris Long. And Chris Long, coming to the Eagles, he was making more news for donating his game check to the people of Charlottesville and things like that than he was for plays on the field. But he shows up in your grades this week.
Yeah, I gave him a B as well. And, look, those two guys, what we're talking about now is depth. We're talking about depth on the defense, and particularly on that defensive line. Those two guys on one play had rotated in early in the game, and I think it was the Chargers' first possession. And those two guys combined to make a huge play that really got the Eagles off and running. Long coming from behind. Phillip Rivers had no idea he was coming. And the awareness, you talk about a veteran. Here he is, a guy who knows how to make a big play. He was not satisfied with just coming up from behind and making the tackle. He went right away for the ball and knock it out of Rivers' hands. And he was carrying it a little loose. And credit Chris Long with making a huge play there. I also, I thought Long, he comes in and he does his job. He got a tackle, a sack, that forced fumble. He's not going to show up in the stats a lot, but it's those plays, one play here, 2 plays here in a game, that you look at that depth at that defensive line. Again, no Fletcher Cox. And I think that really shows that these guys have something that a lot of NFL teams don't, and that they do have some depth at certain positions that really could make or break this season. They're now 3-1, due in large part to their depth to survive some injuries.
Yeah, you wrote about that a week ago. I want to get your thoughts. I know in the past you've been really tough on Aguilar. You gave him a B, and some people would say, well, he's still not big numbers, but I definitely think the reports from training camp are accurate. This guy's different, and he's not going to have big numbers, but he's made a couple of key catches on third downs this year to show you that he's a guy that you can count on now, which you couldn't count on him in the past.
No, you're absolutely right. You couldn't count on him at all. And you used the word different, and I would completely agree. I noticed differences about him in the locker room. You didn't see confidence out of this kid in the past. You saw what I think he was trying to use as a facade of confidence when he was talking to reporters. I remember a couple games ago, actually I think it was the last game, he really had a lot of confidence in the way he was talking about the game, about carrying himself, body language, things you didn't see out of him. And that, I agree with you, is different. And no, his numbers weren't huge in this game. Caught 3 passes for 58 yards, but he didn't drop any. And that was the biggest thing. He had key drops at key times in games. He was pulling in some tough passes yesterday. To his credit, he had one that he was perfectly thrown on his fingertips, and he pulled it in to convert a big third down, got a 36-yard gain out of it. Those were the kind of passes he was dropping that then now you're punting. You're not moving the ball down and getting points. It just really changes this offense. And look, what Ertz and Aguilar are doing over the middle, you got to believe one of these games, and I know you thought it might have been yesterday, Mike, is going to free up a huge outing for Alshon Jeffrey or even Torrey Smith on the outside.
Yeah, I agree. We talked about that on the Countdown to Kickoff show. Scott was in yesterday hosting, and I said one of the keys to the game for me was Alshon Jeffrey. The first drive, they went to him in the end zone, and I'm thinking, all right, they're going to try to feed him the ball. They didn't end up going that route because they ran the ball so much. I'm okay if Jeffrey doesn't have to be a big factor to get you back into a game. If you're running the ball and he's not a big factor, I'm okay with that, and that's the way it ended. We'll talk more about the defense later on in the show. But don't forget Grayson's grades after every Eagles game at 97.3ESPN.com. Of course, right after the Eagles take on the Cardinals next week, Scott will be live at the Eagles-Cardinals game at Lincoln Financial Field. He'll also be heading on the road with the Birds. Which road games are you heading out to? Seattle and L.A. for the Rams, correct? Carolina, too?
Yeah, I'm also going to go. Yeah, I'm going to go down to Carolina, too. I think that's going to be a huge – look, the next couple games are really going to dictate how this season goes. Hey, look, Arizona, Carolina, 2 winnable games. Very interesting to see how they play out. But, yeah, I'll be at Carolina, Seattle, and L.A.
All right, so we'll have that, of course, insight from Scott and Grayson's grades at 97.3ESPN.com. Thanks, pal.
All right, thank you, guys.